Yeah, I did.
Seems like you took this one, transposed it from up there.
Oh. I just grabbed whatever was there.
That should be F sharp, C sharp. My suggestion,
Yeah.
don't play this one. Let's see, this one's fine.
Oh, good.
I think this one I can just love this stuff.
For now, just lay off it, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to bring an extra piece of a manuscript. All right. Yeah, they got little pieces of pizza.
Yeah. So up to here you think is okay, and then I cut off this part.
No, stay out. Stay out the hole.
Okay.
I want to play 6, 7 measures.
Okay. And then come in here.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
And I'll get you the first half of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure to work with another brown man. Hey.
Yeah, are there a lot of other Brown alumni here? Annette Lynn. Annette Lynn.
Who's that?
Lynn. She went to
Rakutansky.
She went to Brown.
Lynn Rakutansky?
I don't know her last name. She said you were her high school teacher?
Yes.
Yeah.
She played cello. She had school. Scoliosis. All right, go out. Get a drink. Gee, I got a tennis stand. I guess it wouldn't fit the other thing. Shalom.
It's been a while. This week's Torah portion, Parshat Pakude, is the last one in the book of Exodus, and in it we finish the work of the Mishkan, which has been sort of the Torah's obsession for the last couple of Parshiot. At the end of a long, hard, laborious endeavor, it's important to take time to celebrate. And that's just what our ancestors did as they finished the Mishkan. That's what we're here to do tonight for Shabbat Hallelu. At the end of a long week, we come together to praise God and be together in community. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. How good it is that we can be here together.
Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim yalalai lalai lalai lalai. Hine matov umanayim yalalai lalai lalai lalai. Hine matov umanayim yalalai lalai lalai lalai. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad.
We continue with the lighting of our Shabbat candles on page 2.
As these candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light.
And we sing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu
We rise together in body or spirit for the Kiddush on page 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikrai kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim ki ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. אמן. לחיים.
We continue together on page 20 with Lechado D as we welcome our Sabbath bride. You may be seated.
Page 20. Lecha lecha dodi, lekrat lekrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekrat lekrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. La 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 lecha dodi, lekrat lekrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekrat lekrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad, Hishmi'anu el hameyuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'liti la 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 la. Lekrat dodi, lekrat lekrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekrat lekrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. La 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 la. Lecha dodi, lekrat lekrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, lekrat lekrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת לקראת קלה, פני פני שבת נקבלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת לקראת קלה, פני פני שבת נקבלה. לה 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 לה. לך דודי, לקראת לקראת קלה, פני פני שבת נקבלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת לקראת קלה, פני פני שבת נקבלה.
We continue with Achatzi Kaddish on page 26.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויעמד יברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחייכו בית ישראל, בעגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעמי עמיה.
Yitbarach.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילם ינקו ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
We rise once more in body or spirit on page 28 for the Baruch Hu. Join with me at the top of page 31. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you sped its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. You may be seated as we continue with Ahavat Olam on page 32. We've got a new key for Ahavat Olam.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו למדת אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך. ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד.
rise together in body or spirit as we declare God's oneness with Shema on page 34.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
You may be seated as we continue on page 36 with V'ahavta.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha b'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha uv'shartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
We continue responsively at the bottom of page 39. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world which is far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth.
The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love.
From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way.
Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces.
Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our great glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed.
ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני, גאה ישראל.
Together at the top of page 43, we read, "Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we might lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporeh sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim."
ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. וקורא עונג וקורא עונג. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. מקדשי שבי, כולם ישבעו ויתענגו מטובך. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. והשביעי רצית בו, רצית בו וקידשתו. חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה בראשית. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. וקורא עונג וקורא עונג. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת.
On page 46, we rise together once more in body or spirit for the Amidah.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei Hakol, Ve'zocher Chastei Avot V'imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Bezrat Sarah. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You may be seated. On page 59. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our life within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh v'hodot.
We continue with our prayer for peace on page 60. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki ata hu melech adon Lecho hashalom, ki ata hu melech adon, lecho hashalom. Shalom rav Yisrael amcha, tasim le'olam. Shalom rav Yisrael amcha, tasim le'olam. V'tov be'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael, b'chol עת ובכל שעה ישלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael amcha, tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael amcha, tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam.
We turn our prayers now to those who are in need of healing. Those who are in need of healing of the body or the spirit or the mind. If there is a name on your heart today that you might want to hold up that we could hear together in community, I invite you to do so as my hand passes over you. On page 253.
מי שברך אבותינו
that's so filled with busyness and noise, perhaps the best gift we can give ourselves sometimes, especially on a day like today, on Shabbat, is a moment of silence. So we invite you to take a few moments in this sacred space to contemplate the words that you find on page 62 and beyond, or perhaps those words which are inscribed upon your heart.
Mark Patinkin has been a beloved Providence Journal columnist for over 4 decades, his work bringing his personal perspective to a range of topics. Mark was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for international correspondence, and in 2019 he was named Columnist of the Year for Gatehouse Media. Mark grew up in Chicago, graduated from Middlebury before making Providence his home, and we're proud to say that Temple Bethel has been his spiritual home, and it has been our joy to celebrate the B'nai Mitzvah of his children, Ariel, Alex, and Zachary, 2 of whom are with us this evening with their dad, right here on this bima. In recent days, as we have reeled from the events of October 7th, Mark has stepped up with a strong voice that speaks deeply to many people in our community. It is quite common for me to be asked or stopped in the grocery store or on the boulevard and asked, have you read Mark's latest column? For his words have truly touched hearts. When a community solidarity trip to Israel was convened in January, it made perfect sense for Mark to join the group, and he stayed in the region to continue his reporting, and his dispatches captured the attention of his devoted readers. Mark will come forward and speak now, and I will let you know that after the service, we invite you to immediately process into the meeting hall, where Mark, as well as Lydia and Bob, who were on the Solidarity trip as well, will be present to take questions about their journey to Israel. Sherry Levine, who is the chair of our membership committee, envisioned this special Shabbat as a way to not only learn from this journey, but also to connect to one another. And so in that spirit, we hope you will find a seat at a table, perhaps with someone you have not met yet, and continue the conversation. We're so very grateful that Mark is here to share his wisdom with us this evening.
Thank you, Rabbi, for that generous introduction. I remember getting a far briefer introduction once when Rabbi Gutterman asked me to speak to the congregation here about being an often first-person columnist. His entire introduction came down to, what can I say about Mark Patinkin that he hasn't already said about himself? But thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you Bob Dukoff, who's here, Dr. Bob Dukoff, who was the one who called me, mentioning that there was going to be a solidarity visit on the part of 20 or so Rhode Islanders to Israel in mid-January. I think that came about because people, after that horrific day, began calling the Jewish Alliance here and saying, what can we do? And the answer was, you can go. And so I joined the Alliance and then stayed on. First, I was intending to stay on for a week, but there was so much to do and see that I stayed for over 2 weeks there. And for the next few minutes, if I may, perhaps I could bring you with me on that journey to the Holy Land at war. From the east, the land of Israel begins as a desert by the Dead Sea, rising like Tuscany into the limestone hills of Jerusalem, then lays back down into green flatlands near the Gaza Strip, a 2-hour drive from where we were staying in Jerusalem. In better times, tourists came each winter to that area that the Israelis refer to as the Gaza envelope to see red buttercups called anemones blanketing the landscape in a bit of a festival. It's where kibbutz dwellers welcomed Gazan workers for years and believed Arab and Jew could be neighbors. That was the hope. Here now is the new reality. Not too many weeks ago, I made my way to kibbutz Be'eri, the worst hit of all the kibbutzim, all the villages by Gaza. The first thing you see as you enter Be'eri are the burned houses, but soon you notice something more unsettling. Hamas wasn't satisfied to just set fire. What wasn't burned was smashed, leaving hardscape patios and jagged pieces. They did to the houses what they did to the people. First they murdered, and then they mutilated. My tour of Be'eri was led by a dark-haired, melancholy young woman named Nektar Shavit, age 26, who survived by hiding as terrorists knocked on her door and she hid inside. Melancholy because she lost so many neighbors. In a community of 1,200, 100 were murdered and many more taken into Gaza. This was the 100th day after the attack and the first time that Nektar was giving a tour. And when I asked why she finally decided to do it at this point, she said, it's because of a sad reality that had unfolded since that day. The world, she said, had begun to deny that this has happened. This was her answer to them. And it's also why I was there. As with all of history's massacres, there is only one thing you can do for the dead, and that is to bear witness. It's a beautiful kibbutz, every block with flowering bushes, and you wonder if you'd be able to smell their fragrance were it not for the aroma of burnt things, even all these months later. And the reason for that is that except for the removal of bodies and the cleansing of blood from some, though not all, of the walls, Be'eri has been left as it was on that day, intentionally so. Most shrines to massacres in history have been sanitized, even those to the terrible Holocaust itself. But in Be'eri, at least for a while, there has been a decision to leave Be'eri not as a memorial, but as an ongoing testimony. This is what Be'eri is now like, and I speak individually of Be'eri, but it's all the kibbutzim there. This really is a symbol of what happened on October 7th. This is what Be'eri is like now. I was using my phone's voice memo app to record Nektar speaking, partly because she was speaking in Hebrew and I needed translation later, but when I tried to transcribe it with the help of a translator, we missed many of the words because of the loud crunch of our shoes walking over broken rubble that the phone picked up far more notably than even the words that were being spoken. Some blocks were left alone and reminded you how lovely this community was, but even in those blocks, those beautiful blocks where you could see why people moved here, even in those blocks, as in all places where terrible things have happened, whether it be a place like Gettysburg or Normandy or here, your knowledge of events brings you to feel the spirits hanging in the air around you. But you didn't need to imagine. This house, said Nektar, is where girls were raped, that house where a baby was burned, and on most houses where terrible things happened. There are large 5 by 8 foot posters of the faces of those that were murdered in their own homes. At the end of the tour, before I said goodbye, I asked Nektar where she was now living, and in a fairly telling and symbolic answer, she said that like hundreds of thousands of Israelis, she's among the displaced. No one's really able to move back into that area, just as they're not able to move back to the north of Israel on the border with Lebanon, which is being shelled by Hezbollah missiles. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis are displaced right now, and all the time, and even in my own hotel, I ran into some who had to be placed in a new area, and even somewhere in luxury homes, luxury hotels in Tel Aviv. But as one of the guides on our Rhode Island trip said to me, his own brother-in-law and family was in a Tel Aviv luxury hotel, and his words, and it sucks because they want to go home. I asked Nektar if she planned to return to this destroyed kibbutz, and her only answer was one day, and then she looked off into the distance and repeated it one more time. One day, she said. And now in the heart of Tel Aviv, let me take you to Hostage Square, where I arrived on a day when thousands of people were there because of the birthday of one of the hostages. It was the youngest hostage's birthday. That hostage's name was Kafir Bibas. Maybe you recognize it because he's the youngest hostage, and this was his first birthday. His first birthday. A third of his life, now approaching half of his life, has been spent in captivity. In that square every day on an ongoing basis, there's a long table, now originally with 220, 250 chairs, now with 130 empty chairs, plates with moldy bread to symbolize the conditions of the kidnapped, and on the plates in front of each chair, many of the chairs wrapped in barbed wires, and on each place setting, someone had set red paper butterflies on the plates, and the symbolism was clear. If only. Then I saw an older man wearing an orange t-shirt that said, "Free my family now," and when I approached, it turned out his name was Eli Bibas. He was the grandfather of one-year-old Kafir, and he had an image of Kafir's whole family on the shirt that he was wearing. Now, as a reporter, I might have wanted most to talk with Kafir's parents, Yarden and Shiri, but I couldn't and still can't. They were kidnapped too. So was their other child, who has the same name as my own daughter, 4-year-old Ariel. The whole family is still gone. It's a mystery why Hamas would keep a baby and a young child. Or maybe it isn't. I asked Eli, the grandfather, retired as an air conditioning tech, if after 3 months it has gotten any easier. If anything, he says it's far harder. And the reason isn't just personal. With the focus now on Gaza casualties, he said, the world has forgotten the hostages. Or perhaps worse, they haven't forgotten, but no longer care because they are Jews. I wrote many columns defending Israel right after October 7th, before I decided to go as a reporter on the ground. But as a journalist who journeyed to Israel, to the Holy Land, I thought it was my mission to understand as much as I could, and so I went to the West Bank. Taking a half-hour cab ride from Jerusalem, then walking through a very long one-way border tunnel into Bethlehem, easier to go that way than the other way, which is now majority Muslim, the place where Jesus was born. That's the demographics of the West Bank in the last just 15 years or so. I wanted to see it authentically, so instead of hiring a traditional guide, I found a teacher there named Omar Sawara, 39, father of 3, who is struggling now because Israel has stopped remitting tax revenues, cutting Omar's pay from the Palestinian Authority in half. Tourism has also collapsed there. The whole day I didn't see a single non-Palestinian beside myself, and this is Bethlehem, which used to be a center of tourism, both Jewish and primarily Christian. I must have stood out because people kept approaching me. At one point near the Church of the Nativity, where Jesus was born, I was approached by a merchant and taken to his antiquities shop. I got a pretty good deal on a rare thing, $400. It probably would have been $1,000 in Jerusalem proper, for a decorative Star of David on ancient Jerusalem glass. Yes, he was selling Judaica, as they all do, and they all say we welcome everyone in Bethlehem and wish they were back here. And the merchant was beyond thrilled at my purchase. He told me it was his single biggest sale since October 7th. Then Omar and I, we drove into a refugee camp. There are many there in Bethlehem. Bethlehem has kind of an image to some as, oh, isn't that where Jesus was born? That must be just next to the Western Wall. No, it's deep into the West Bank, with refugee camps. He said some of the refugee camps would have been more dangerous for me to go into. He said there's more radicals there. And he said there's a simple reason. He said there are more martyrs. By martyrs, he meant family members of martyrs. He meant people that have lost fathers or sons. And that, he said, is what keeps the cycle going from the Palestinian side. We went into this refugee camp, though it was more like a neighborhood, this being the 4th generation of refugees since the founding of Israel in 1948. And yet when we were hosted inside by a family of 20, which is often how the families live in the West Bank, sometimes building extra stories on top of their buildings. The one reason is because Israel restricts Palestinians building beyond the envelope of their villages. As I sat with these 20 who gathered, it was kind of a big deal. Everybody was coming to see the Western visitor there, and they were very hospitable, serving chicken and rice, and they're very savvy about a journalist being there, too. They want to tell you their side, their story, and they spoke of living for the hope of returning to their ancestors' land in Tel Aviv 70 years before, which none of them had ever seen. But still they insist it's home. And that's the mentality there. They were wonderful hosts. I've never heard the word welcome spoken so often, but you realize how deep in the culture there is a focus on returning to the past instead of building toward a future in the land where they now live. They look behind them for something that is seemingly unattainable instead of embracing where they are. But as Omar, who was quite moderate, drove me through checkpoints to his village after we left Bethlehem, 20 minutes away, I can't deny how this land is changing. There were many Jewish settlements spreading and spreading and spreading, as Omar put it in Arabic, shway, shway, little bit, little bit. I'm not here to either defend or judge Israel's policies on the West Bank, but I can report that life there, right now, for 2 million Palestinians is very hard. And now, one of my final stops, let me take you into what might be called the belly of the beast, into Gaza itself. Come with me as I squeezed into an IDF Humvee with 10 others, the first time Israel had taken journalists into Gaza in almost a month. Charlie D'Agata from CBS was there, and Fox News, and some comparable reporters from European networks. And somehow a Providence Journal guy snuck in there. We drove through one of the very openings Hamas had blasted through the border fence on October 7th, which in some ways was, as our commander, the commander of that day, Lieutenant Anshi was his name, said was a satisfying thing that they at least were able to attack back through the same break that Hamas attacked through. As we drove in there, there's a big kind of open area for about the first half mile in, kept as a buffer, so at first you didn't see the dystopia you're so used to seeing in the news. This was just open land. Welcome to Gaza, Lieutenant Anshi said, and soon we stopped at a newly discovered tunnel. It was the closest tunnel they had found to the border fence. And they'd excavated way down underground, because these things were way underground the way they worked. And then you came up kind of a silo, or the Hamas came up and down a silo, and they'd excavated down it, and we kind of worked our way and stumbled down a long, steep earthen embankment with your boots sinking up to the ankles as you went. And I got to the bottom and looked inside the tunnel, where you could just picture how the attack had unfolded. A couple soldiers were right around the opening, and one of them said, "This is not near the border, it's on the border." And that soldier, by the way, was a 64-year-old man and had volunteered, and was one tough hombre, I'll say. And that's Israel right now. The whole society wants to be part of protecting their homeland. And the tunnel was, I'll say, engineered impressively with concrete, and it's stunning, though, to see the effort Hamas put into creating something that seems so difficult in an engineering basis, and yet whose only purpose was not building community or even defense, but to attack Israel. And that, as you kind of, as I was there, and as the others were there, and as you would think if you were there, you would think to yourself, this was the closest tunnel. This is probably where among the first ones went in. This was where a war that has upended the whole world started. As we explored it, and then I came back up to ground level, I ended up talking to a 26-year-old soldier named Bar, they don't give their full names, whose grandparents used to tell him about Jews being murdered in pogroms in Russia, which to him seemed very far in the past, something he could not relate to. But he himself, as so many were, was deployed on October 8th to gather bodies from this most recent pogrom, this worst pogrom since the Holocaust. And now, he said, he saw with his own eyes that it was happening again, and that is why he fights. And so many of them say the same, so Israel can be safe. Then we drove on a mile to a big school the IDF had taken back, 3 stories high, 2 wings, a tank parked there. It was now a bit of an Israeli base. They'd taken it back from Hamas. Think about that. They had to fight Hamas to take back a school. The other side Hamas tries to deny that they used such buildings for their bases, but it's right there in front of you. Weapons in classrooms, and a tunnel in the basement that Lieutenant Angie said they tragically did not discover at first because it was so well disguised, and Hamas members came out after they took over the building and killed 2 of his men, and a bullet went through his own arm, but he's still in the fight. I said, that sounds remarkable to have found all that in this school, and he just shrugged and he said, it's every school, every mosque, every health center that we have come across. At one point, a concussive bomb landed so close it shook the vehicles, and 30 seconds later, its smoke, which smelled a bit like fireworks smoke, swept over us. We could hear automatic weapons fire in nearby Khan Yunis. We're fighting house to house now, said Lieutenant Anshi, which it's true that there are bombs from above, but it's also clear as once you go there to realize and even hear how the IDF is fighting house to house as well. Some of the soldiers there showed me the weapons they have. The Israeli army now uses specially engineered automatic rifles that have very short stocks so that they could swing them around corners with less of a personal profile to expose themselves, because that is how war in Gaza is unfolding in 2024. Finally, we drove through what had been a suburb with big stone houses, impressive houses, 3 stories high, each on about a quarter acre or a half acre of land, not a lot of trees because that's Gaza's environment, but these were very nice houses. There are well-off people that lived in Gaza. So much was given up for October 7th. Except now, this area, hundreds and hundreds of houses along this mile that we drove through, this mile where all the wealthier members of wealthier Gazans lived, at least in this particular area outside Khan Yunis. Now it's a post-apocalyptic landscape, a true dystopia. Most of the houses turned to rubble piles. It's like a tornado scene, only worse because the ground itself is disrupted. And that stays with me to this day. This is a terrible sight. A beautiful neighborhood demolished. But Israeli soldiers ask, what do you do when the militants hide inside those houses to kill you? And as we drove back through the dystopia back towards the fence, you couldn't help but wonder how this place could ever be whole again. And yes, whether Israel needed to do this much damage, but you also wonder more, far more, why Hamas doesn't free the hostages and save what's left of the land they call home. When you see it with your eyes, you see the destruction. It's inconceivable that those that are supposedly leaders of this homeland wouldn't step up to stop it. You can't believe that they won't do that because of what's happening to their homeland, and they don't care. I was going to end this talk there, but instead let me end on something that's more remarkable than even the war zone itself. A remarkable thing that I found and saw in Israel that my fellow members on the mission from Rhode Island all saw too. What we saw was a surprising normalcy. Our hotel was on Jaffa Street in central Jerusalem, and in the midst of this terrible war which has disrupted the world, the sidewalk cafes every night were full of life, and every day full of life. And when we went out to a restaurant one night with the mission on our first night there, it was vibrant, and friends of our group came to join us. And they said, we feel we need to push ourselves to do this. And it was that way everywhere. Except when you ask people how it has affected them, virtually all of them have been personally impacted. With friends lost on October 7th, or sons in uniform in Gaza. Everyone. In fact, a close friend of Bob Dukoff's family, I was sitting next to him, and he said his son was in Gaza. And every few minutes as I spoke with him during this hour-long dinner, every 10 minutes or so, he looked at his cell phone because he said that the commanders forbade their soldiers from using cell phones in Gaza because they could be tracked. So the commander was the one who would send out a blast WhatsApp. Israel lives on WhatsApp to all the parents to say, your sons are okay. I think the word he used was shlemim in Hebrew, which means healthy. They are okay. And just tonight in the lobby, tragically, Bob let me know that he'd heard from his friend, and that very commander, whose job was to reassure parents that their sons were shlemin, okay, he is now among those. He is now among the fallen of the IDF. Everyone is affected. October 7th, friends lost, sons in Gaza. Everyone's affected, and yet there they were in these crowded sidewalk cafes. And how do you explain that? Well, I'll always remember the best explanation I got. I went to the Middle East's biggest hospital. It's called Sheba Hospital, just outside Tel Aviv, and that's where most of the IDF wounded have been treated. And I went onto a patio where the soldiers gather. It's a bit of therapy for them. They gather in their wheelchairs and their crutches, and they keep each other's morale up. And one of the soldiers that I spoke to was named Menachem, a young guy, only 22. He'd almost lost a leg, still had no use of a hand, and had a 10-inch scar from his lower abdomen all the way to his chest, so they could dig out, they were able to dig out the shrapnel. And he told me that from that patio, he sometimes looks towards Tel Aviv, where people are working and biking and out enjoying restaurants, and he could hear some of that going on. And you wonder at first, gee, how would these soldiers feel about everyone being, embracing life while they're in Gaza and being shot at? And he said he was thrilled by it. That, he said, is why IDF soldiers do what they do in this conflict, so their country can have normalcy. That's what they're fighting for. Not just safety, but normalcy. And it says so much about the Israeli character and the Israeli soul and the Jewish soul, I would even dare say, that people are embracing that normalcy. And that is my most lasting image from my time in the Holy Land at war. In every definition of the word, despite tragedy and the upheaval in Gaza and the heartbreak over the hostages, the people of Israel truly do live. Thank you.
Thank you for your words, for bearing witness, and we all raise our prayers today for Shlemut, which is wholeness, and is also the word, the root for peace. We raise our voices and our prayers in the hopes that saner times prevail in a world at peace. We continue with the Hallelu as we rise once again in body or spirit on page 282.
Hallelu l'shabeach la'adon hakol la'tet gedula liotzer breshit shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama shelo
this time, we remember those whom we have lost in recent days. This evening, we remember Geraldine Foster, Richard Shine, Jean Wilkes, and Barbara Sheps Wong, laid to